I'll tell this now. Originally, our drugstore was just about a third of that building, and the entrance was off the Shelby Street side. So when we got along a little bit, and one time, Miss Goldberg got mad at us, and we thought we was going to be kicked out of there. We rented from her, so we bought the building across the street where the Western Auto Store was. It was for sale, so we'd have a place to go. Well, Max got his mother calmed down, and we didn't have to move, so we ended up selling the store to Alex Coel, and he put his Western Auto Store all in there. But the one thing I want to say about the old building, the upstairs is one big room. Now, I can remember there being a skating rink up there. If you didn't watch, you kill yourself, so it wasn't very wide, and tried to turn, you run into the wall. There was a sewing shoe factory up there. There was apartments up there, but originally it was built for a movie theater. So the back part and up close to the ceiling is where the projection room was, and it was made out of 1/2-inch thick steel all the way around, top, bottom, and the door, because the old film was so flammable. If it caught on fire, it couldn't get out of there. But the main thing I remember, back up in that little section in the top right-hand corner, was about 12 seats, and that's where the color folk had to sit if they came to the movie. And that always stuck in my mind. And I'm thinking if they're going to tear that building down, they're almost going to need a crane to get those pieces of steel of that projection room out of there. So, tell about the rester too. I didn't know the Goldbergs ever had a rester in the basement.
That was in the basement, and it was Saul Goldberg. That was
Max's father.
Max's father. He dug that out, had that dug out, and on the Shelby Street side, they put an entrance that the people would walk down there and out. They had toilet facilities and everything down there. And then on the other end, toward the main street, there was access windows. There's 2 windows that you open down there, and an iron top that you peel back. All their supplies went through there, and all the garbage came out through there. So, but the foundation was getting old, the building was getting old then, and water started coming in. Rats, we had rats that you'd think was pets, and that got closed up. Temporarily, it was a pool room one time.
Yeah, I remember when I was in high school, it was a pool room.
Let's see.
Then up on the main floor, that was a pool room at one time also.
That was the same pool room. When Ballinger bought he didn't buy it, he leased the whole building. And he took the pool hall out, and he's the one that put it in the basement.
Oh.
Because he made that a furniture store.
Yep.
And he cut a big...
That was Russ Ballinger, yeah.
He owned that whole block. And he cut a big door through the triple brick wall, of the store.
Right. Yeah.
And put a little alleyway back to his other stores from there. And we had to seal that up. Man, them guys, they threw brick forever. That was 3 stories thick on the ground floor, and 2 bricks thick
On the top floor.
on the top floor.
Then also, originally, that entrance from Main Street, that was a bank. I don't know what the name.
1922, it was First National.
First National Bank was in there. So they had a big concrete right in the middle of the store on the north side. They had a concrete floor that went clear through the basement, thick, to support the vault up there. So that old vault, when we finally bought the building from Goldberg, that old vault was right in the middle there, and we got Ray House was here then, a man, and he gave us a price so much he would get that out of with a jackhammer. that was the worst time we had. We put up plastic to try to keep the dust and all, but he jackhammered every piece of that out of there, and he got it done. He said, I'll never take another job like that. But I want to tell you about the deal I tell today on buying the building. After Max's mother had passed away, we decided we'd like to have the building, and we was going to expand the store, take over the whole building. So Max finally gave us a price, and we agreed to it. But Max, one thing, he wanted $10,000 of it under the table in cash. Not even be on the records whatsoever. So we had to work and scrap to get $10,000 in cash. And I remember he came in one day and come back. We had back in the prescription department, went through there, and then we had another off branch of that back where our safe was. And I remember he came in one day and came back there, and I remember counting him out $10,000 worth in cash on that deal. Max was a man, he hated to pay taxes. And his only investments were in government bonds that you didn't have to pay taxes on. This is the story I heard. But if you went out with Max, you went first class. And he had a big, what was that, nice big car. There was 3 of us went with him to Maysville to a political meeting of some sort. And he took us in his big flashy car. It was nice as anyone in town. And I remember going over there, and Max paid for everything. We didn't have to pay for our meals, drinks, or anything. So, and of course, Max, when he went out socially, he dressed, he was a good-looking man anyway, but he really dressed up nice. He never married, but a lot of events, like a Chamber of Commerce dinner or something, he would show up with like the best-looking woman you ever saw. Nobody knew. Whether he's paying her or nobody ever knew. But he was a good friends with Buckskin Bev that owned the restaurant there in Cold Springs. Now, he spent a lot of time down there with her, but he never married. And the reason they said his mother told him one time, don't ever have anything that you have to feed.
Yeah.
So he never had any animals or wife.
Anything that eats.
That eats.
That's what she said.
How much did you buy the building for?
40, wasn't it?
What?
She asked how much we paid for the building. Wasn't it 40?
You know, I can't remember.
I think it was 40,000, and we paid him. On the books it was 30, but we actually paid him the extra 10, so it was 40,000. Now there was a wall between us and the other part where the pool room was, and when we got the whole building, we busted a door between the walls so we could go through the whole length of the building.
That was about 2.5 feet lower than our section too,
Yeah.
to make it 7 feet ceiling
Yeah,
down there.
I mean, you walk to get into
Our side, you had to walk through
Yeah.
like this after you bumped your head in
a
there.
couple times.
Even a short guy like me, it was all squeezed together.
Yeah.
As I said, it should have been tore down 30 years ago.
Well, why it's bad shape now, the big timbers in the floor, they're about a foot, foot and a half wide.
My son-in-law made that bottom thing there out of some of that wood from those timbers.
Yeah, and about that wide. Well, those timbers were pushed into the rock wall, the ends of them. Well, over time, that rock wall, the damp, the water, the ends of them had rotted, and they fell. So the safe in the store is in the basement now.
I heard about that.
Yeah, it fell through the floor because the floor gave out. And so that's the reason, because the ends of those floorboards were in the wall, and so it's dangerous to be in there now even. Biggest memory I have was when we bought the whole building. We got the wall taken down, so we had the 100-foot long, 33 wide space. And was that guy with McKesson, or did McKesson,
That did the painting?
the guy that set it up for us, and he come in and designed everything. And
Oh, you mean when we remodeled?
Yeah, remodeled and set
That was his regular job, and he come down
How
and,
did we get a hold of him?
well, Tom and I went around about 6 or 7 different drugstores. You watched the shop, and one of them even gave us his blueprints and things for when he put in the store. And we picked what we thought was the best of everything. Like one guy, he told us, he said he had beautiful fluorescent lights, you know, the 8-footers, running length of the store. And he said people wasn't looking at the merchandise here, they were looking up to see where that line went. So he turned them around, and so that's why we had them edgewise.
Okay.
That broke that tension of everybody going back.
Well, there's one creative guy that did part of the setting up the store. I think that transforming from our old store, like putting our prescription department across the back all the way sideways of the store and the front end. And I was real proud of what our store looked like. I mean, it looked as nice as any business in town or any other drugstore, except the big chains maybe, that I'd ever been in. So I think that was, when we did that and
we put Falmouth in the 5th.
Right, and then the murals, we had the guy from
everybody loved that.
South Carolina. I think everybody enjoyed that for years. And those two things,
guaranteed for 10. It's been 30 years.
Yeah, and those two things we did, I'm most proud of. Yeah.
Well, Hilda said that she's for about 6 months after we did all that changes, there's several people that she knew that when they had any company or anything, they brought them down to see our drugstore. I mean, you stepped right out of the 1900s into the 1970s when you went in that store.
Well, the guy that helped us set that all up out front, he was creative. I was impressed with him and satisfied. I have no idea what we paid anybody for anything. But and the murals, it was a lot of money then, but not so much.
10,000 was it?
I cannot. I mean, if my life depended on it, I couldn't remember.
But he had to cover up one.
How many windows?
Some windows, and he had to rent a, one of those machines to stand in that goes up and down to paint.
And he put up one picture of the girl. And somebody made a remark like looked like a woman of the night. He didn't like it. He took it down, took it back to South Carolina, and didn't even put it up here. Of course, he did a couple other buildings. Cliff Wallace got us on to him.
The school is where we got on to him.
Yeah, Cliff Wallace had been there and got him to do some work at the school. So he did our work, and he did this wall of the 3L building, didn't he?
Yeah.
I forget who owned that now.
And we let the word out that we would, that we were going to remodel, put all that stuff out there. And we asked anybody that had any old pictures of the building. And remember, people started bringing in pictures. Rice from, not Butler, but anyway, up in that direction. She had them for all the way back to 1900, postcards and things. They let us borrow them, and they gave them to the artist. He made it perfect. It just looked like that place did in 19...
Awesome.
And remember, we had Tom stand in the door?
Yeah, he really...
I've got that on
well, she's got it too.
They didn't exist then. Tape machine.
Oh, tape machine. Well, she's got it. I mean, he did a perfect thing of Uncle Tom. Yeah.
Well, we had Tom stand there, and Doris's dad walked along. Tom stepped out and said, "Howdy, how are you today?" And we got that handshake.
Yeah. One day I was in the store, and I don't know what happened between me and Aunt Tip, but out there in the middle of the store, she looked around and she said, looked me in the eye and says, "I wish to hell we'd have sold this store to Bill Reynolds, not you." I learned how to handle her. She got mad. Just don't say anything. But 10 minutes later, she right back to normal.
They were always changing their will. I don't know if they ever got that far, but they were going to do this and do that, change that wheel.
Oh, yeah, let's see. They had me going down those stairs, didn't
Well, I
they?
was one on the stairs.
You on the
But they ended up cutting me off right about here.
Okay, where was I at? Was I on the stairs too? Or?
Just the next one up where the old door, that door was.
Oh, okay.
Had you around that door there.
Okay, I about forgot about
Now,
that.
those steps and those banisters, those were brass.
Yeah,
They were put in by Saul Goldberg when he had that restaurant down there.
okay. So you Saul and his wife came from Russia, wasn't
Yeah.
it, originally?
Max wasn't even born.
Yeah, he was a baby. Now, all the other older children all did well. In fact, he had a sister who had money, but she didn't like the expense. She moved to Mexico City and lived for a long time because she could live there cheaper and have a maid. And she finally came back, I think. But
It finally caught up with her. Max, he kept me on what he was going down. She was trying to get her money out of Mexico and just stone walls everywhere.
oh,
I bet you they managed, though.
uh,
Finally got it out.
there
Because
was,
she wasn't going to leave without that.
yeah,
Max said that he had an older brother, and when they landed in New York, they were waiting for somebody, some Ken was supposed to come get him. Well, there's a guy selling fruit, and he had bananas there, and they pulled them off, and the guys give him a nickel. He got to crying, he wanted one of those bananas. Well, to shut him up, she peeled out a nickel. He went over and got it, took it back over there, and they all got around it. They didn't know how to eat it. They didn't know. Of course, he was telling me from third hand, but he wasn't even born yet.
talking about doing business. And the 70s and 80s, and a little bit of the 90s, 70s, 80s were our best years. And Falmouth was still flourishing then. Christmas time, we did a lot of business. We got a lot of Christmas stuff in for Christmas. Oh, yeah. Well, we had one salesman that come in, and he would buy $500 worth of candy. I ain't gonna tell you how he paid for it, but anyhow, that was kind of a thing. And he'd use that, he'd pass out at doctor's office as a receptionist, So they always knew him and liked him. And where was I going with this dumb story? Oh, the best, the most money we ever took it. Now, Uncle Tom told me the first day of business, when he first went in business, he took in $5 and something. Well, our best day in the store, I kept the books and all, and that particular, it was in December, and a lot of people was wanting to pay. We did a lot of charge business. A lot of people come in early, pay their bills to get it done before the end of the year. And I kind of saved a couple of state aid checks. I run through the cash register. The best day we ever had was a $10,000 day. I mean, we never came close to that before, but that always stuck in my mind, and that was in the 70s or 80s, somewhere along there.
That was a lot of money.
And that was a lot of money back then.
Tom taught me everything that he knew, and all the little ins and outs and things, and I guess I was a pretty good student, or either let on like it, but we were just friends, just right up to the very end. Now, after him and Tip were moved to the nursing home, I never did stop in, and I think they mistook it. I didn't think they wanted to be bothered. I thought they wanted to be at peace, but it really upset Tippy.
Well, I
It
never
was
did.
too late to back up on that.
I never did hear that.
Well, I'd been down there before, but I didn't go in and see them.
One other thing I want to mention here, of course, Uncle Tom hired students. The 20 years he was there all the time. But back then, the student, when he got paid, he had to go to the bank and put half of it in a savings account. And of course, you couldn't do that today. And he had a lot of cliches he said about life and money and so on. And one other thing, it's not how much money you make, it's how much you keep, was one of his that I always remember. And another one he had, work and save, young man, so you can help pay for those who don't. That one there stuck in my mind.
And you make money at something you know something about. You lose money at something you don't know anything about.
Yeah,
that really stayed with me.
Yeah, he always said, don't get involved and put money into something you don't know anything about. And that was pretty good advice. And of course, Uncle Tom, my dad, uncles, they all grew up and went to work during the Depression. So, and my grandmother, their Uncle Tom's mother, she was about as conservative a woman as could be. She didn't hardly spend any money. Even when we killed hogs on the farm, she wanted one head. And she'd take that one head, scrape all the meat and everything off of it, and she'd make her lye soap out of it. She wouldn't buy soap, she made her own lye soap out of that every year. So they came from a frugal disposition, so to speak. And I think it rubbed off on us a little bit. We never did overspend.
He taught me a lot of things. And I'll tell you what, it's more like a father and son relation. I spent more time with him than I did the rest of my family. Not intentionally, but that's just the way it is. If you wanted to eat, you had to work. And if you wanted to work, which families are going to be? The ones paying you the money or the ones that love you?
Oh, another thing, OT was adamant about what the temperature was going to be in the store. And he set the temperature, and if it was off 1 degree, he could tell it.
Oh.
And he'd go check
Even
that
now,
thermostat, and if anybody touched that, he started raising Cain. He got us all together one time. He said, "Don't anybody touch that thermostat but me."
I'm cold.
But he had one temperature, and if it varied whatsoever, he could tell it. So all our kids worked in the store, and I think it was good training for them, and especially Bobby. He still remembers a lot of the older people that came in the store, and so as I say, that was a good experience too. We had were able to they could get some spending money. We treated them just like the other students. They didn't get any.
Well, I put mine on the payroll. I think you finally did too, didn't you?
I think I remember getting like $2 an hour, and I remember trying to do the books, and Dad had a little way of doing it, and there was the front register and the back register, and I was off a penny, and I remember I thought, well, I'll just wipe this out and fix it. Well, Dad could tell I fudged and didn't account for that penny, and I remember you went back and found it, but you had your routine set up, and I remember I think I got like $16 every 2 weeks or something for the paycheck.
I think it was, we didn't have the only 2 students we had to fire. Everybody, all the other students that I know of were successful in life. Some better than others, of course, because we had ended up 2 pharmacists and 1 accountant that I know of. Well, John Schmidt ended up dying the carpets. I think he had a good business. His wife was an RN, I think, and so I don't think any. We didn't make any mistakes with our students, because I think they all benefited.
But Joe Morton, he still calls us and everything. He was one of that went into pharmacy too.
Yeah, well, him and Wyndham was really doing good. And London,
that boy was a genius, you know, Wyndham.
Yeah, well, he's.
And you wouldn't thought he'd know anything, and he was smart.
Okay, well, one of the good experiences is we sponsored the Moreland girls softball team for 2 or 3 years. We had a good time there. We played all over the state. won the state tournament. We all drove in 2 vans to Iowa City, Iowa to compete, and we got our butts beat twice straight real quick, and we came back home almost the same day. But there was a good bunch of girls, and we hear from quite a few of them along now.
Whatever happened to all them trophies? You know, we had a row of trophies run almost the length of this room out here. Oh, I know. Some of them you gave them back to them, but they could take those plates off and use them over.
Oh,
We had
good.
those.
Okay.
You remember that?
Yeah, I think I do. Oh, so yeah, we had a big box of them and gave back. To
Yeah.
as well as Harry Roberts
Yeah.
and Purdy to use out here for their tournaments. That's what we did. That's right.
Yeah, I graduated from the old school across from him. I was the first one in our family that made it all the way through high school.
Oh,
And
high
then I
school.
was the first one from the whole damn crapshoot to go to college. I'll tell you what, that was a shaky one. Tom was trying to get me to go, you know, and I said, Tom, nobody wants to pay attention to a little sawed-off fart. I mean, I don't care how good you are, what you know. See, it always hurt one of those Jack Bean's brother.
Yeah.
See, he was about an inch shorter than me or something, and that's all he ever talked about. He was a flyer in the service.
Yeah.
And he wanted to be a pilot when he come out. He said, you don't even have to know how to fly the plane if you're 6'2" and got broad shoulders. No, he was really down. He was right, but wrong way to
Look at it. Look at it. What year of high school did you graduate?
52.
52, okay. And I graduated in 1955, yeah. We had Imogene Jones. Now, for some reason, I don't know, somebody left, and we needed an employee. And I think Uncle Tom mentioned this widow. Imogene Jones just lived down the street from me. Her husband and Hurl Weaver owned a feed store here in town. And
The flour mill, they stole bags and bags of flour.
Yeah, and he had a heart attack in his living room one day, early 40s, and died in her arms. So she was left with 2 children and up there, and Tom said, why don't you ask her if she wants to work? So I stopped up there on the way to work and introduced myself and asked her if she ever thought about maybe working. And she said, well, she don't know. She would come down and fill out an application, and she did, and we hired her. Oh, we were needing somebody. We had to do by hand all the public assistance prescriptions. We had to fill out a form, send to Frankfurt to get paid. So that was her primary job when we hired her. If we get busy out front, she'd come out and help us out front in the cash register and all. And she told me one time, years later, she said, I feel like you saved my life, because I was up there feeling sorry for myself. And while she was there, we decided to put the circular stairs to the upstairs to build a little office and another restroom. So Russell Jones, I forget his partner, Mr. Wells, and they were carpenters.
Yeah.
So they did the work back there, and that was right by her desk. So Russell and her got to talking. Finally, Russell asked her out. The long story short, they married.
She was a little older than him, but it was a good match.
Anyhow, they went down there and around just north of Sanford, Florida, and they bought a steakhouse. And they were in business and doing well. And so Russell and Imogene and her children moved to Florida, and Russell became a bartender. No experience, but he became a bartender for Mr. Gallagher and worked there until he died. And Imogene and I, usually at Christmas time, she'd send a long letter how they were doing, and I'd do the same. And her son, oldest one, who did well as a CPA, had married and had a couple grandchildren. But finally, Imogene passed away too. And I guess the Gallaghers, He's same age, about the same age as me. I don't know if
He
he's.
was a swell guy. Half the people that had no place to go and no work moved down there,
Yeah.
and he put them to work.
We always, well, my Uncle Tom, he always hired high school students, which OT started there at 13 working for him. And he always had high school students that worked at night and on weekends at night and also. So over the years, really had some good high school students. And the ones I remember when we were there was John Schmidt, who was Dr. Schmidt, the veterinarian. He was one of the first ones that we hired. And to back up a moment, OT and I kind of divided up the duties. He kind of took care of the buying and the equipment and stuff, and I kind of took care of the hiring and firing and the books all the time. And so usually when we'd have an application for a high school student, I'd call up the high school, and Miss Margaret Ritter would always normally tell me whether they were a good student or not and whether to hire them. So we always had good students. And John was one of the first ones. And Regina Coleman, I always remember, was one of the first ones, who ended up marrying Bob Guyette, who was a 6'8" UK basketball player, who ended up being an oral surgeon in Phoenix, Arizona. So they spent their life out there. Over the years, we had good ones, but I hired 2 young guys one time on my own because I thought they needed a job, and there's the only ones we ever had to fire. And we didn't caught them. Somebody told us they were stealing from us. Part of their job was taking the garbage out twice a week and putting on the curb. What they were doing, they were putting items in the garbage and taking them out there, and after we closed, they'd come back and get them. And I think it was Mrs. Marquette that lived in a house that faced the back, saw them and told us about it. So that's the only 2 I ever fired. And over the years, we had 2 pharmacists out of the group. We had a accountant now, Bill Merrick, become an accountant who's still working today. He works in Covington, a big company. He takes care of all their tax obligations. John Schmidt ended up in California in a business of dyeing carpets. I think he ended up doing pretty well. I think he's retired now. Let's see, over the years, we had a lot of them, and on up, we had Gay Ammerman was pretty good, and old manual typewriters, and then later on, after we got our computer, Michelle Hamilton worked for us, and she was pretty good with computers and helped us a lot in the prescription department. And I'm just proud of all the people that did work for us. And we had, was talking about floor.
Doors.
Doors. Doris Angel Floor. She and I were the same age when we went to school together, so she worked for us for a long time. Audrey Hargett, and of course Ruby Wyatt was there when OT and I took over, and then Delaney, was her first name? Joan Delaney.
Yeah, Joan.
Were 2 that we inherited, I guess, when we took over in 1965. So they were 2 oldest employees. And but I wanted to mention Hilda Wolf worked for us, started probably at 70, part-time. She worked every Wednesday. And she run the front cash register, did a good job. But the best part about it, if I went to work and maybe 10 minutes of 8, somebody called in, said they were sick and couldn't make it, I could pick up the phone and call Hilda. Hilda said, "I'll be there by 9 o'clock." And she was. She'd be dressed, hair looking nice, and be there to work. And she told me one day that she said the highlight of her life in her later years was coming to work there on Wednesday. Because she was a people's person. She'd see everybody, she knew everybody, and worked. Of course, she raised a big family in a 4 or 5 room house. And of course, a lot of them are still around, found. Some of them passed away. And we got other students, but I can't, off the top of my head, I can't remember them.
But we ran out of boys. They were all starting to play basketball and do this, and we tried the girls. And after we had 1 or 2 of those girls, we were happy with the girls. They put out. They really liked their job. And we had a lot after that, didn't we?
Yeah. Oh, one other one was C.W. Snodgrass. He was one of the early ones. C.W. kind of had a slow motion moved, but then their job was about 20 minutes before closing time. They was to get the mop bucket out and mop the linoleum in the store. So about 8:30, if he's closing at 9, well, he started coming alive, and his old motto was, "Come alive at 9." This was his motto, and he'd go get his mop bucket, and he'd move faster than all day long. And I understand he's in Florida now, Alzheimer's in some kind of home, and doesn't really know straight up. But there's also his distant cousin. What was other Snodgrass?
Well, his sister worked there too. She's the one that married the state trooper.
Oh, yes. Yes, she did. But what?
We had hired 3 different people from that family. They were all farmers and good workers.
Yeah, well, what was the other Snodgrass boy that died of cancer at 40?
Oh, that was a cousin to all them.
There was another Snodgrass,
One
same
swell
age,
guy.
yeah, same age as C.W. worked with him, and he married, had a young daughter, 3 years old, and died of cancer in early 40s. I remember him. That's all I remember. Yeah.
See, I worked for nothing for Tom for about 5 years.
Yeah, well, he came on weekends to work when he was in college and all. And of course, Uncle Tom had it by himself.
He opened on a Sunday too. That was for me.
Okay. Well, I don't remember.
So I could get a little extra cash.
Because I don't know anything about his, who he run around. I know some of the guys who run around, but as far as girls concerned, but Sally came in here she had a sister that had children that lived here. Is that
6
right?
children.
And she came in, I guess, to kind of help with those children. And Sally was an all-state baton twirler in Indiana.
You've seen some of her pictures, haven't you?
Yes.
And
We got them all over the house.
so anyhow, of course, how old is she? 10 years younger than you, or?
No, she was born in 41. I was born in 33.
Oh, okay.
8.
About 7 years.
Yeah, a little younger. But anyhow, they ended up marrying, and well, I was thinking he didn't marry till I got back here, but I guess he did because he's already had his
Yeah, we got married
50th and all.
November the 6th.
Yeah.
And Gay was born on November the 7th.
Yes.
A year later, thank goodness.
Yeah, he always tells that joke. OT was good at telling jokes too. I mean, he was a joy to work with all the 29 years. He could.
I could hear a joke once through and know the whole thing.
He could get anything to work. It might.
Now that was a gift there.
Yeah.
It's true, I could look at something and anything we ever got, I'd put it together and then go check the book and see if.
Yeah. If all else fails, he'd finally look at the directions. He could put it together, but he always had some jokes, and he was at the work. He was telling Sally jokes. He said, "This has nothing to do with my wife." I don't know where he got them, and I only remember one of them. But he was talking about Sally had a date one night, and they went out with this guy. And on the way home, he parked with her. Well, he started trying to take her pants off. Well, Sally just laughed at him. She knew they wouldn't fit him. Well, I'll tell you, I mean, the soda fountain was it was a loss leader. I mean, we ate up any profit if we made it ourselves. And OT wanted to get rid of that 10 years before we finally did. It irritated the hell out of him, the fountain did. But we had ice cream sundaes and sodas. And of course, Ruby Wyatt,
she would load them up for him.
when she gives anybody an ice cream cone, she she'd give about twice what she's supposed to. That's why I hear a lot of the people respond to remember the ice cream that they got, because she and Joan. And Joan, she was a fanatic on cleaning, keeping everything clean, and Ruby did, well, to a certain degree, but she more like the fountain and all, and she liked to talk to people. A lot of people come in to counter and talk. Well,
we had the coffee
for a
in the
nickel.
morning.
Coffee in the morning for a nickel. And one thing I can remember, a Mr. Little guy that walked every morning, come in the back door and sit out there, take a rest. But anyhow, he sold his farm out in the county, and they bought a house in Falmouth. So he'd walk every day. He'd come in the back door, and he'd sit down on one of the counter stools, and wait for somebody to call or to come in, and he knew who to talk to. And if somebody...
Frank Harris was it?
No.
Frank kept me there at night. I couldn't get away.
Get rid of him. Well, he'd sit there, and if somebody said something about age, he'd jump up and he'd say, "How old are you?" And they'd say, "Well, I'm 78. Well, this guy was up in his 80s. He says, "I know just how you feel." He said, "I was that age once." I can remember him saying that over and over. Betty Lou Immiger was his name, and his daughter's name was Betty Lou. She was as pretty when she was 65 years old as she was when she was a cheerleader at Butler in high school. She started coming in, kind of taking care of their bills when they got along. And his wife was about 3 or 4 inches taller than him, and the story was they never missed a dance anywhere. That they loved to dance, and they never missed a one. Back like my dad, that's when they told me about Dad. In his 20s, he never missed a dance anywhere. But Mr. Immiger, I mean, he was one of those people that just a joy to be around, and I do remember. That's the only one I can. That's all I remember on that one.
Leaving that back door open was one of the best moves we ever made, because we had people that had to go to work. There's no way they could wait till we were open, and word got around, and they'd bring their bottles in, drop them off there, and then come in about 10 minutes before closing time and pick them up. They really appreciated that.
Well, I remember the big one about Crotty coming in and pulling a rope. I don't know what the hell he was doing. That rope. You remember?
Yeah, I was on the council, and there was something he was rubbing. He swore up and down that the city was charging him double on all his electricity and everything.
Oh.
Now, he was smarter than that. He knew better. And they picked me to go out there and talk to him. The first thing you do is he said, "Will you drink a beer with me?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Come here, I'll show you where I keep it." We went through 3 rooms, and he had a great big top open deep freeze. Only he didn't have it on deep freeze. He had his beer in it.
No.
Had a hassock over the top of that and a big lock in it. Reached over and unlocked that, lifted it up, got 2 beers out, set it all back the way it was, and locked it up. Hell, wasn't nobody going to steal anything from him. You probably throw $2 in on the table.
He was one of the characters of the community.
We had more than our share of them.
Yeah.
You remember the guy that lived in Butler, and he always had his hand on his head like this?
Jay Wolf, I remember. He was a character. Yeah.
Well, he finally married a woman that she hadn't been married, and it was a perfect match.
Well, I want to tell you about one family come in, John West.
Oh, boy.
And family would come in, and you could tell who was the Boston family. It was John. And they lived out in the New Zion area, which is almost to Bracken County. They'd come in, and his wife, she never said anything, but John was always talking, had stories, and a daughter usually come in with 2 little kids, and I thought they were her kids. Well, I just found out in the last couple of years, she never married, and the kids was her sisters or brothers, and she babysitted them all the time. But I always thought that was her children. And so John, Mr. West and his wife and the daughter are all dead now. And I found this out from another Hamilton woman that takes care of the cemetery over there. which I made a little donation to me, and I mentioned about them, and she wrote and told me all about it. But he was he's one of those, you're glad to see him come in. And the other one that I come in was a man who lived there at Antioch, just over the Harrison County line. And if he needed a little money, he running short. I guess over the years he had collected shotguns, double-barrel shotguns. He'd bring one in, and he wanted to sell it to me, and I'd buy it. It wasn't that much, and I still got most of them today. I've got about 10 or 11 those double-barrel shotguns with the rabbit ears hammers on them. And he was nice, and of course he's dead and gone now. And yeah, you can make
he had another brother that come in all the time.
Oh, yeah.
And he's the one that always wanted something to make his bowels move.
He was a blacksmith or something. He had a shop. And he ruled the roost too. His wife and kids would come in, they didn't open their mouth. And I can remember him, Junior asked something about his shop, how he found everything. He says, I know where everything is in my shop, just like you know everything's back there on that shelf. I know exactly where it's at.
He let us know that he knew where everything was, what it was worth.
I forgot about him.
What year he bought it.
I forgot about him.
But they were all intelligent.
Yeah. Oh, the next one, I got to tell this one. What was Wigglesworth's first name? Harvey? Not Harvey.
Wigglesworth.
One you told him to take his bag of refills and take them downtown to get them cheaper.
Oh, I can't remember.
Well, there was a fellow named Wigglesworth. Him and his wife didn't have any children. And he would come in, every time he'd come in, he would complain about the price.
Raised it again. It hadn't been changed at all.
Yeah. And one time he come in and Tagamet, I remember, he had to take. And he said, I can get that downtown for $5 cheaper. And he said every time he come in, it was that way. In fact, I hated it so much. When he come in the front door, we could have 7 or 8 people out there waiting. I'd go up and get his bag of stuff and come back, and we'd fill them and get him out of the store before he'd be there complaining in front of everybody. Well, OT, he come in one day and he said something to OT about it all. OT had his little sack of refills on, and finally OT went over and says, here, Mr. Wigglesworth, why don't you just take this bag of prescription down there where you can get them cheaper? It won't make me mad. Well, he opened it, dropped his mouth, and he didn't say another word about it. But years later, he and his wife had to move into the Bedford house, which was assisted government housing. Well, they couldn't come out, so I delivered his drugs over to him, prescriptions and all, and they were all very appreciative at that time. But he shut him up about complaining every time he come in.
Well, I wasn't insulting.
No,
I told him, I said, and he could get that Tagamet cheaper, but we couldn't buy a train load of it like Walgreens.
They were using it as a loss leader, which a lot of businesses do. They'll advertise something cheaper than anybody else could even buy it in the first place.
Reynolds always took 10 products that he made loss leaders out of, well-known ones that everybody knew.
Yeah. So.
And a lot of people can put 2 and 3 together and get 8.
Yeah.
They thought because those were cheaper that they were getting all of them cheaper. He was doing pretty good. But
we used to have this little salesman. He's about the height of OT. Who made the thyroid product. Little guy come in. Well, I can't remember his name, but he come in and one day and he brought,
Billy Weeks.
No, that was Lily.
He and I were the same size. He'd buy me clothes.
Yeah, well, this guy, he brought me in a cacti one time.
Oh, yeah, we never did think of his name.
We never have found
I can see him plain as day right now.
Yeah, and he brought me in a cacti, and I thought,
always had to smile on his face.
Yeah, I said, well, next time you come, I'll buy one of them. That was his hobby. He had a little place at his house. I've still got that cacti today, and it's still hanging on. It's about that long, hanging over. I don't know why it hadn't died, but I still got the one. and I've got one other one, and I'm thinking that's the one I bought from him. But over the years, later on, I tried to think of his name. I was going to go contact him and get a few more. Nobody knows his name.
I can see him playing.
I can other stores, they can remember the guy coming in. Nobody, and I'm other salesmen, they can remember him, but nobody can remember his name. Was a barber for 50 years.
His last name was Scott. Of course, we called him Scott.
They called him Scotty. Yeah, he was related to Pud Bray, who was my neighbor I grew up with, and all their kids at Butler. But Scotty was married to a Wilson lady. They didn't have any children. And when they walked on the street, I mean, he always had a suit. So they walked along, she had her hand in his arm, hooked in his arm. And they walked.
One of them would hold the fist, and he'd hold that, but they were arm in arm. They used to walk past our house with.
Yeah.
Just
for years and years. I mean, they went to church, and they were same disposition.
They
all
were
time.
Nice people, but they were a little odd.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's some of the people in the community you remember. Yeah.
It was almost closing time, and Mildred Dickerson was talking to me. She stopped in quite often, and really nice lady. And while we were talking, two girls that I'd never seen before walked in the store, and they walked around and around, and finally they stopped down near where the prescription counter is, and that's just across the room from Mildred and I. And they were looking at all that stuff, but shaking their heads and shaking their heads. Well, one of them walked over, and Mildred saw that she wanted to ask me something, so she stepped back, and the girl wanted to know where the ointments and all that was. I said, well, you was in the right section there. She said, yep, they all say hemorrhoids. Well, you go back there, whatever you're looking for is there. Well, she hadn't been over there very long, and Mildred stepped back up and was talking to me, and we looked up, and they were both walking over to that end of the store. Mildred stepped back again, and one of the girls walked around and stood at the little step. We had a step down from the pharmacy department into the rest of the store. And she leaned over and pulled her hair back and said, do you know what this is? And it was quite obvious what it was. She had crab lice in her eyebrows and in her hair, and I'm not going to mention it, but it would be there too. So Mildred, she stepped back, and she just listening and watching. And I, trying to look professional, I said, did you ever think that you might have crabs? And the other girl jumped up, waving her arms, and she said, I told you that's what it was. See, that's what it was. Well, Mildred, by then, had her hand over her mouth trying to contain the laugh, and she was gurgling and everything else. And when that girl said that, I told you, so the last time Mildred couldn't hold it any longer, and she just opened up and let it go. But to make a long story short, I sold her the magic wand she was looking for, a little tube of stuff that would kill almost anything, much less crab lice. And whenever Mildred would see me after that, and it went on for a long time, she would take her arms in the motion that that girl did when she was throwing her arms up saying, I told you, I told you, I told you.
Favorite story of mine is we were robbed, and they came through the back door with a crowbar. They tried to get in the safe, and they couldn't. We had some change out where we collected phone bills and rolls of quarters. Well, later on, the police department got a call from Dayton, Ohio that stopped the guy, and he had a bag of drugs, and some of our labels went on it. They wanted to know if we were robbed. And they said they wanted to come up there while they opened the trunk. So the city police, Mr. Oliver, what was his first name? Oliver was his name, and a county deputy. We drove to Dayton, Ohio, and the policeman went out there and popped the trunk open. Wasn't anything in it, but over the side was 3 rolls of quarters. Well, he just picked them up, put them in his pocket. He said, well, that'll go into our policeman's fund. And he said we couldn't prove that there were our quarters either. And the money he had on it that he got from us, when they jailed him, they'd already gave that to his wife. They said, well, you couldn't prove that was your bills. And I thought, then if we get robbed again, I'm not even going to report it. That's my favorite story.
Mine's about the guy in the rooster.
What?
The guy lived with Morgan, and this old man, he lived alone, and his neighbors would bring him in, to town, and he did what he needed. But back then, that first capsule come out, the pain. Darvon.
Oh, I know what story you're going to
Was
tell.
on the state would pay for it.
Yeah.
Well, he came in one day and it was too early. You can only get that every 30 days.
Yeah.
And I went over to him. I was trying to be nice. I said, I almost said his name. I can't fill this for you. They won't pay us. He said, well, honest to God, son. He said, I popped the top off that bottle, and they flew all over the floor, and the old rooster gobbled them up faster than I could pick them up. And we had an unknown rule. You probably didn't know it because I pulled it out when I needed it. If somebody told me a story that I had not heard before, I would go ahead and fill it. They could be as right as they were wrong. As it turns out, I'm glad that I did. Because the neighbor picked it up the next time, the lady. And I said, you know what he told me? He said, the rooster ain't get what's your old son. She said, he lives in a house. He said, the front door hadn't been closed for years. And said, the animals got the run of it. He said, he's got goats and dogs and chickens. Because it's the old rooster that gobbled them up. So I'm glad I let him have it because he told the truth.
Well, I got one other one too. Way back there, Uncle Tom had the first TV in the store, and it had a U-shaped counter. And he stayed open to Saturday night a lot of times. Well, every Saturday night, John Hendy and his family and his grandkids and all, they'd come in, sit around the booth and have ice cream and watch TV.
Pepsi. Boy, they love them
Pepsi.
Give me a Pep.
The story I want to tell is old John Hendy came in one day, had been to the doctor. He come in and he handed OT a prescription. He said, what he called him Junior, said, Junior, that doctor said I might have to take that medicine the rest of my life. And OT said, well, cheer up, John. That might not be too long.
He about had a heart.
Oh, yeah, his mouth threw open. I know. Oh, yeah, well, they were good people. We were back in the back one working, and I remember Gay Ammerman was working, and she hit me in the arm, and she says, that guy just stuck a box of candy in his jacket going out the front door. Big me, I was going to get him. I went out the front door, and he was going down the street, and I hollered at him. He stopped, and I told him, you come back here. Well, he came back. I brought him back in the back. Well, he just walking along. I couldn't tell he had anything. And finally, I forget who else was back there. I said,
I remember it.
You remember?
Just like him. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, well, he took it and he had that 2-pound box of Russell Stove candy kind of stuck up on his arm.
He had it between his shoulder blades, and he was wearing that leather jacket.
Was that where he had it?
Yes. Yeah, he just one sweep, and he had it down his back and his shoulder blades like this.
We didn't call the police or anything on him. I forget what we did.
You told him you didn't want to see him in
the store. That's right.
You were real nice. I don't know how you could control yourself.
The other.
I was beginning to doubt the girl, though. I don't think she saw any candy there. And but everybody's eyes got that big around.
There's one other little thing talking about things that happened in the store. Is it on?
Mm-hmm.
Is we kept, of course, Crest toothpaste. Well, the big tube, we only carried one at a time. We didn't sell many of the big ones. When it got sold, we go up there to the counter, checking the stock to reorder. Well, here that big tube of Crest toothpaste. The box would be there, the tube was gone. So I don't, with somebody, we furnished their toothpaste for years. We never did catch anybody. We put in cameras. We never did catch anybody doing it, but somebody took it out of the box, and woman, she put it in her purse or something.
We don't think they took it out of the box there. I think they brought in empty boxes and did the switch.
Oh, yeah. Well,
And if somebody go to buy something, you kind of heavy, go like that. Wasn't anything in it. Well, you know, I finally got a plastic bag and hung it up and all that stuff, and it was about a third full when we went out of business. Just, would show it to all the help. You know, look, somebody's not doing their job. 1980.
We both were involved in activities in the community to try and prove everything for us and the community. And OT was on the original group who started the Wool Festival. It was originally out at the fairgrounds, started out there. And in the beginning, one session they had a hard, the weather was not suitable, and they didn't quite have enough money to pay the bills. And I do remember OT and I, from the store, kicked in some extra money to pay the bills one year. And I do remember that, going out there that time, and it was dark, of course, didn't have near the light that they got at the new one. And I remember watching one event, and there's only 2 or 3 people of us sitting watching it, and there was raining and blowing. It was a terrible night for the Wool Festival. You want to say anything about the Wool Festival?
Well, we had a humble beginning, let me tell you.
Yeah.
Lord, we let people set up their own tents and things. We only did that 1 year. From then on, we bought the tents, built them for it, and everything was uniform. And of course, we had to leave that area. We were in the school, on school property, and they kept planting trees and everything right where we had a stand the year before. And we got pushed out, and we bought some property out near the park. And the first year was the year that we had the flood. And Falmouth was a popular word all over the world because it just practically washed us away. But we managed to pull off that first one there for those new grounds. And our attendance was 42,000 people. Now, if somebody came on Friday, that was 1. If they came on Saturday, it was 2. But nonetheless, it was all due to the flood. People wanted to come and see where the flood was, but we've never met that numbers again. But
Well, I remember one year, I don't know how we got away with it. Now, Lions Club or the JC were having carnival-like, and we set up a tent on Main Street.
yeah,
Got away with it. We drove pigs into that, and I remember we set up we set the tent for a bingo to be set up, and we went through all that hard work and all, and that night it became a storm. We did not make a nickel off all that. We worked, and a few of us worked our butts off setting it all up and didn't make a dime out of it. And how we even, we probably didn't get permission from the state to even put it up, because, you know, we diverted the traffic around it. Couldn't do it today.
well,
But that was one of those memories.
Falmouth Fire Department used to have their fair there, right up down the street
Yeah.
you're talking about. They had, of course, they were all small merry-go-round, and they had
Yeah.
the little racers for the little tiny ones, you know, the cars, and they had the
Ferris wheel.
On the tornado, we heard it was coming through, so we got warnings. So I went to the basement, and a couple of employees, he went to the front door and watched it. I do remember that.
I wouldn't have cared if it took me out of this life. I had to see it. And those old windows were been up there 100 years. They were flexing in and out like
Yeah.
that.
And it went through not very far from us, but right, I was scared it was gonna hit the middle school. And it just barely missed it, really, yeah.
They concealed some of the damage. You didn't want people to know how bad it was. One corner, it lifted part of the roof and shingles and stuff. It
Yeah.
just took them away. Well, we were so damn lucky that we had a chain store wanting to buy us out, because money don't mean anything to them. They'll pay whatever it is, whatever it takes. We did real well on the sale and never took a penny of it ourselves, did we?
No,